Police used tear gas and fired flashbang grenades at hundreds of protesters in South Los Angeles. The confrontation between police in riot gear and protesters came after word spread through the largely Latino neighborhood of a raid by immigration agents rounding up day laborers at a nearby building supply store. Residents came out to show their outrage.
I thought it was very hostile and very aggressive towards the people that were here. We don't treat our brothers and sisters like that here, regardless of their immigration status.
Protesters set a car on fire in the middle of a street, sending up clouds of smoke. Some gave aid to people suffering burning eyes from tear gas and pepper spray.
We want people to go back to their homes, go back to what they're doing, at least for now. And again, you can peacefully protest. But please remember, when people are out here, they're impacting residents, they're impacting the local businesses. There are people who are going to lose money who own businesses here in Paramount because of this activity.
It was the second straight day of raids and protests against the seizure of workers. On Friday, federal agents stormed into a clothing store near downtown LA. The Department of Homeland Security says more than 100 undocumented migrants have been arrested in 2 days of raids across Southern California. Senior White House official Stephen Miller said the protests were an insurrection against the United States. The Trump administration's stepped up enforcement in heavily Hispanic Los Angeles, where roughly a third of the population is foreign-born, seemed to be intended to send a message. Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass said the raids create a sense of terror in the community. Despite the furious protests by people who live in this neighborhood and others here in Southern California and across the country, as well as condemnation by Democratic politicians, it does appear that the administration of Donald Trump is determined to carry out its signature initiative, rounding up and deporting undocumented workers and migrants. And it appears that that policy is going to continue and that the administration doesn't particularly care whether the people here like it or not. Rob Reynolds, Al Jazeera, Compton, California.
Well, let's bring in Robert Patillo. He's a civil and human rights attorney. He joins us live from Washington, D.C. Robert, good to have you with us. So Trump says he's deploying 2,000 National Guardsmen to Los Angeles. I mean, how significant is this legally, and what federal laws or articles does Trump need to abide by to deploy the National Guard?
This is absolutely unprecedented, nearly in American history. The last time I can think of this happening is 1958, when President Eisenhower deployed federal troops to Arkansas to integrate schools, and they had to call the National Guard to protect students like Ruby Bridges and Mary Bill Patillo to integrate schools. That is how rarely these laws are used. But under the Posse Comitatus Act of 1876, federal troops are banned from law enforcement functions inside of states. This is a result of the end of Reconstruction and the negotiations around the Hayes-Tilden Compromise, which resulted in the withdrawal of federal troops from the South after the Civil War. An exception to the Posse Comitatus Act is the Insurrection Act of 1807, which President Eisenhower used in 58, and which President Trump would have to use right now to take the National Guard troops that he is calling up under Title 10 and allow them to actually perform these law enforcement functions.
So who has the ultimate authority then to deploy the National Guard, and how would the Insurrection Act play into this current situation, if at all? And are we likely to see legal challenges then against the deployment, Robert?
There will absolutely be legal challenges. Normally, if federal troops are going to be used inside of states, it's going to be at the invitation of the governor of that state. For example, in 1992, California Governor invited federal troops in to put down the LA riots. But if the governor, such as Gavin Newsom, has not asked for federal troops to come in, and these troops are coming in against his will, then there will be challenges, and more than likely a judicial stay by the appeals court, and this will have to go to the Supreme Court in order to determine who has the legal right to deploy those troops if a law enforcement function, not to mention the fact that soldiers are not cops. And that's why you do not use them as a law enforcement. This has grave danger for the people of that area.
Yeah, it's an interesting point you make, Robert, because the California Governor Gavin Newsom posted on X saying the federal government is taking over the California National Guard, and that'll only escalate tensions. But can the federal government and the president take over a state's National Guard under Title 10? And what exactly, briefly, is Title 10?
Title 10 simply governs the status of National Guard troops. So when the president takes over the National Guard unit, he is elevating those troops from being state-level National Guard to being federally activated, and therefore the federal government pays them. They're under the command of the federal government. Now, that's usually used for overseas deployment. If you're going to take troops from California and deploy them to the Middle East, for example, you'll do that under Title 10. He would have to raise up to using the Insurrection Act of 1807 as an exception to the Posse Comitatus Act of 1876 in order to use those federal troops in a law enforcement function. And that is something which is so rare in American history. And if we're saying that this is what's going to happen if you protest against the Trump administration, then truly we are losing our democratic values. That is what you will see in almost any autocratic country, the use of federal law enforcement against the local will in order to put down speech.
Robert, just a final thought to you. I mean, this, not surprisingly, has a rising political dynamic to it as well. I mean, Trump says if Governor Newsom and Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass can't do their jobs, then the federal government will step in and do it for them. I mean, as we know, California is a democratic state. So is Trump also flexing his political muscle here as well?
I believe so, and I believe that he's doing so to the detriment of our constitutional norms. At the end of the day, the reason that we are a republic is that we are made up of a union of 50 states, and the president does not have direct authority over every state. We're now seeing President Trump going to New York saying he wants an end to congestion fees and using his federal powers there. He's going into Harvard to say he wants to change curriculums there. He's suing law firms to change their values. He's going after corporations. He's now saying he's sending direct federal troops into Los Angeles to put down speech. At what point in time do people realize exactly what's going on a macro level within this administration? And when are those small government conservatives going to come back and say, maybe this is too much power in the hands of one man?
All right, Robert Patillo, really good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed for talking to Al Jazeera. Robert, thank you.